Hey, you're listening to a podcast. I'm Blair. Brody's laughing.
Hi, I'm Brody.
I'm Zach.
And I'm Mike.
Mike, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and why we got you on today? Well, we'll get into that. But yeah, why don't you introduce
Why don't we talk about why we're here first?
Yeah.
Well, why are we here?
We're talking about Transmedia today. And
Fair
that's why
enough.
we have Mike.
Yeah, that's why we have Mike.
Mike, what's
he's an
Transmedia? Please help us.
Tell us all about yourself.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, I'm Mike, and I'm going to talk about Transmedia.
Mike just waved for all of you that are not watching because there is no video.
Transmedia is like, it bridges the gaps between different kinds of medias that we all use. So, in order to tell one story, you can use things like video, games, music, poems, short stories, anything to kind of mesh together to make it one seamless experience.
What designates it transmedia other than like cross-plat? Like that stuff where it's like you're watching a DVD and it's like go on your iPad and learn fun facts about why Johnny Depp's doing this right now. It's coming up on your iPad. So like that's cross-platforming, isn't it? So
Yeah. Transmedia is more of having one experience with one story, but using those different kinds of media to tell it. So you might, in order to tell, let's say, a chapter of a comic.
Well, how about instead of being vague, why don't you just tell us about what you're doing?
Okay. That's fair. So, in a non-vague term, I'm working on a project called Injection. Not the same one as Warren Ellis and Declan Shavely.
Assholes.
Mike's came out first.
Mine did come out first, technically. They just have more money and
Bigger names.
But Injection, what we're doing is we're building an app that will tell the story of Injection, and while we're telling that story, you will be able to interact with the different panels on the digital comic. You'll unlock animated scenes, and while you're reading, you might unlock content that are like side stories or kind of build up the universe through short stories or poems or whatever else as you read. The more you read, the more you unlock. Yeah.
Cool.
So it's like achievements for a comic.
In a sense, it's
Sounds like building the world around a story.
So how do you decide like what aspects of like storytelling work best with which, because you're using many different types of media, like how do you come into like, oh, I want to tell this part of the story, what kind of format am I going to use? How do you make that decision?
Making that decision is never actually easy, and that's something that we're working really hard to kind of mostly just figure out what works best in terms of telling the story. So sometimes we will try and use like a piece of video or music, and it doesn't work, so we have to completely scrap it, and then we find that maybe a GIF will tell that aspect of the story better. So it's really a lot of hit and miss, but the point of that being is Transmedia hasn't been really implemented as a major storytelling tool yet, and we're really pioneering the seamless experience with it, with our Injection app and everything else that we're trying to work on media-wise at Nanomite Studios, the studio that I have. So the biggest thing is just kind of seeing what makes an experience more seamless, but kind of keeps you immersed into it.
What are some examples of other transmedia that like you might want to touch on? Just like just so people get a better idea of like maybe they've already experienced transmedia, basically.
Yeah. So I mean, in a broader sense,
You guys can talk about this too. Blair and Zach can also talk about this. We can all talk about this.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we've all experienced transmedia.
I mean,
We consume media.
The earliest I can think of is Star Wars. Just books, movies,
with the expanded
shows,
universe, right?
yeah, comics. They've done it all.
They have.
But it's
Toys?
It's not like
Do
Injection,
toys count?
like what
Do
you're
toys
talking
count as
about,
transmedia?
Mike.
Like action figures?
No, because they're not telling a story.
They're not necessarily.
They could.
You're telling.
Yeah, you're telling the story with the action figures.
Well then.
That's like handheld fan fiction, really, when you think about it.
Okay.
'Cause-
I like to call it imagination.
yeah. Could be that too.
No,
A little
Imagination's
foreign,
the
but
original fan fiction.
I think the most recent example is Fallout.
Thanks for getting us back on track.
Yeah.
No problem.
topic.
With Fallout, they have the Fallout app, the Pip-Boy app.
Yes.
Oh yeah, we want.
Yeah.
So
None of us have played Fallout yet, but you've played a ton of it. Tell
Yeah.
us, please, don't tell us about Fallout because we don't like spoilers.
Because I
here.
don't want to cry.
is there something
or
to do
not
with
have
the
it.
atomic bomb?
But we want, tell us about. Do you have the app? Do you use
Yeah,
it?
Is it
I
like
You
do.
don't have to show us. Nobody else can see it.
Boy?
You can show us later.
Yeah, the Pip-Boy app is just basically, it mimics the Pip-Boy and it connects to your game. So you're able to look through all of your own quests. You're able to choose some of your own inventory and play around with all of those things that are in that menu. the
So it's
Pip-Boy
so
menu.
it's like a seamless pause menu,
Yeah.
basically.
So it's kind of similar to the. Is it kind of similar to the Destiny app where you could move around your equipment
Like
and stuff?
move
Yeah.
through the
vault
app?
space around?
It's
Okay.
like I think the gaming industry is way ahead of the Transmedia curve because they're trying to make everything more seamless.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
they go
Oh,
along.
Actually,
yeah.
even
I mean,
I was talking about this earlier with not way back in the day, but Halo 3 actually is my first, I think, real solid example of seeing transmedia, and that was with Halo 3 released on an app on the Xbox, like the Halo 3 Armory or something like that.
Oh yeah.
wait, wasn't that trash though?
Horrible app. Thing was broken as hell. Did not work. Like you're like, oh, choose your armor, and you like click it, and then Master Chief dies. Like something just horrible happens, and the entire app crashes. But you got like cool little factoids about the armor and stuff. I'm pretty sure, like
Yeah.
if you looked through the app and you could see your character stats and everything.
Well,
Yeah.
that idea has been almost perfected now with the Destiny
With the
app
Destiny
because,
app, and now-
like, I play
yeah.
a ton of Destiny. You guys know that, and I would hate playing Destiny if I couldn't use the app to switch my gear around between my characters and my vault space and stuff, because in the game it's so tedious
Yeah.
to switch things between characters and go to the vault and all that stuff.
there's so
But
many
I can
loading
be in the middle of a strike and be like, hold up, guys. I want a different gun. You gotta wait for me. But it only takes like 10 seconds.
Another example is, has anyone heard or played Dying Light?
I know it.
I heard
Never
it's been
played
doing
it.
some cool
So-
things. I just don't know what those are.
In Dying Light, if you look into the game, you'll find posters that look like sports posters with QR codes on them. You put on your phone, use the QR code reader, it takes you straight to a blog talking about a sporting event that was going on in the city, which is why there's so many damn free runners in the city
Oh,
when
that's really cool.
it has the zombie apocalypse. So
Oh.
it's not just that there's like it expanded the storyline and
Yeah.
understanding as to why things were the way they were. It wasn't just a convenience.
It's probably not actually transmedia, but do you guys remember those toys back in the day? And like you just went to the grocery store and you just scanned barcodes and you unlocked different like monsters and things to collect. It was like
Yes,
Pokemon, but with barcodes.
I never actually played with that, and I forget what it's called.
I always
but
wanted it, but I never had
somebody was telling me about that a couple weeks ago and how cool it was.
Yeah,
how
and
cool
that
they
was
thought
like
it was.
way back in the day. That
was like before Tamagotchi even. I
Yeah.
think. And like now the one I remember, Tamagotchi was obviously huge, but you guys remember the Digivices, right?
Oh yes.
It was
Yeah.
like Tamagotchis for nerds, basically.
Yeah, and it was cool. I think the second gen ones, to get back to the transmedia and telling a story through different devices, the second generation of the Digivices had their own story where you kind of
Yeah.
like supported the Digidestin in your own way.
Yeah,
which was cool.
You were like a pseudo Digidestin
Yeah.
by playing with your little thing, and it was a step counter, but everybody just sat there and shook.
Yeah, and also like the popularity of amiibos kind of
Yeah.
shows
Yeah.
how
Yeah,
Transmedia
well,
is
between like
growing.
Amiibos, Skylanders,
There's the
Disney
Infinity. Yeah, there's the Infinity.
the new Lego Dimensions, which I've been playing a bit, and I hate Lego games.
I love
Like,
Lego games.
They're
They're wrong.
they're just boring to me. But Lego
Yeah.
Dimensions is a genius move
Yeah.
because it's gonna make so much money.
What is Lego Dimensions? I
So-
just heard the name.
So basically, do you know what Disney Infinity
Yeah.
is? So it's
So they're
kind
doing
of
that
like
with
that.
Legos now?
Yeah. So basically, it's like its own Lego game. It comes with Batman, Gandalf, and Wildfire.
What a team.
Seriously.
No, it's Wild Style.
Wild Style, sorry.
Yeah, get the name
from the
right.
Lego movie. And it's, you know, it's its own little story, but it's basically like the Lego movie, and you can travel between different Lego worlds. And so they then started releasing separate sets. Like you can get a Back to the Future set, Ghostbusters, Portal, even. Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Simpsons. Like, they have grown so quickly in such a short amount of time. But it's such a cool idea because those little sets that you get, they come with a character, but they also come with, like, their own mission. And they open up the world that they're from, too. Like, you can go play in Portal when you get the little Chell and turret Lego things.
There should be a potato one. That would be amazing. But that's so. I hate that. I love it because it's so smart. But you're making so much money off of other people's intellectual property, which is like.
I don't know if you're
Okay,
making...
Lego's
no.
been doing that for ages.
I
though.
know Lego's always been doing that, but now they're just finding new ways to like evolve into
No,
that,
yeah,
which
it's
is really
so
neat.
good. Well, and Skylanders just recently struck a deal with Nintendo too. So there's now
snap.
There's now Nintendo Skylanders. Well, there's a couple of them. It was for Superchargers, I think. It was at E3 this year. I don't really remember. But I mean, they have their own. Nintendo has their own thing with the Amiibo too.
Yeah.
Which works great for the most part. Some games do it better than others.
Yeah.
So how do you, like, when taking all of this into account, how do you make sure that you're not losing, like, your audience isn't losing something if they don't choose to, like if they say, like, oh, if something's I'm going to read something, I'm just going to read something. I'm not going to go off on on any of these paths, sort of thing. Like,
Yeah, how do you make the consumer care?
because I'm stubborn sometimes, and I'm like, I don't really want to watch a bunch of videos.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, if I'm gonna read something, and then be like, you know, maybe I'll get into it, maybe I won't, sort of thing.
An example comes from the Marvel AR stuff.
Yeah.
I always see, because I sometimes read comics. I used to a lot more, especially when the AR stuff was first coming out, and I didn't touch it because I didn't care. I was like, whatever, I just want to read this comic. I don't care what you're going to show me. I can probably go research it myself anyways.
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge is, and also the most fun in terms of being a creator, is finding how to make that story seamless. So if you're reading the comic, you're not going to lose anything. The only thing that happens is if you take part in reading maybe the side story, you're going to get more out of maybe a character's history, or more understanding as to why a character feels or thinks a certain way, but it doesn't detract from the story at all. So if I wrote a story that would kind of mention that they had a character had a past with another character, we can write it and push it out so people can experience it the same, and they'd be like, oh yeah, so they just don't get along. But you can unlock the content that would actually show or explain in more detail as to why. So it doesn't necessarily affect the people that just want to experience it in a seamless, casual way with the same medium. However, they can also still, if they're hankering for more, they can get that piece. Because I'm that way too. Some mediums, I just want to get the main story, and some, like Fallout, I will find every little tiny piece of lore you can get.
You actually had a great example about the seamless storytelling earlier when we were talking, and that was with you were talking about like some random mook that gets his sword broken in the comic. You're not missing out anything if you're just reading the comic, but if you had the app and you unlocked something after that scene happens, you learn the entire history of that sword. That sword was like his great grandpappy's sword that helped liberate like the people of some like distant land, and then like it's been passed through the generations, and like you get to read this interesting story about Hitman number 2.
Yeah,
Hitman number 2.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like it doesn't necessarily take away from the main storyline, but it kind of gives more depth into that character, and maybe if that character comes back down the line, people will care a little bit more.
So yeah, really, the challenge comes down to the same challenge that happens with everything. It's coming up with interesting content.
Yeah,
once people want more,
it can be
they will
completely
go get more.
beneficial.
Yeah.
It just depends on if people want to spend their time on it.
Yeah,
basically.
And that comes down to storytelling, which
Yeah.
I'm sure which Mike definitely has down.
I mean, I read the first issue, and I like it a lot. I can vouch for it.
Well, that being said, when it comes to making just the comic. We're also looking at having a seamless experience through other means. So we're working with Wattpad right now. You can look us up at Wattpad at Nanomite. We don't have any stories up now, but we will have them very, very soon. And we're going to be having short stories that will implement pictures, GIFs, sound, as like a radio show, and kind of make that whole experience seamless and add to it. However, if you see the picture that establishes where the character is and then start reading the story, it's not going to detract from the story. But if you take the time to listen to the radio play, it kind of connects those dots just a little bit better.
I feel like we should talk about Patreon. Yeah. Because a lot of web content producers use Patreon as a means to push more transmedia. Right? I mean, I don't know a ton about Patreon except for I read some webcomics. And most of the webcomic creators that I read also have a Patreon. I don't go on any of them because I don't have the money to. But like, it's like, Mike, do you know a lot about Patreon, or can you tell us a bit about it? Or Blair, Zach,
I mean,
do you know anything about Patreon?
From what I understand, it's literally you're subscribing to a person, but literally it's more. Think of it as like giving tips to a bartender. You like what this person's doing, so you're paying them so they can keep doing it. I don't think you get much out of the deal.
Some of them you do.
I listen to the Lore podcast, and Aaron Menke, like at the end of each of his podcasts, is like, "Hey, come on to if you subscribe to Patreon, not only do you get extra episodes, but you get the whole transcripts with his notes and stuff." And I think that's really cool.
Yeah,
I haven't done it yet, but I am considering it because his stuff is really well written, and
right.
I would like to see his writing in actual format.
Yeah.
So
consider Patreon kind of like a Kickstarter with rewards based off of what you do.
Yeah.
So
like immediate benefits almost.
Yeah. A good example is my good friend and character artist Andrew Kwan. He has a Patreon, and he has a comic called Gel. So basically you can consume the content for free, but it will only be just the images. You won't get the word bubbles or anything unless you're a Patreon.
Oh.
And if you're also a Patreon, you'll not only get the word bubbles, but you'll see the different steps as to how he got there. You'll get some other exclusive content. So it's you get perks for being a patron for the people you support.
Right. Cool. Patreon's cool.
Yeah.
I like Patreon.
The whole crowdfunding movement is really cool, but that is just a whole other monster that I would like to talk about some other time.
It's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I'm always asking questions.
Okay.
No, because if somebody has to.
If you're working on so many formats, how do you yourself feel like you're not spread too thin? Because obviously there's going to be points in which you're going to be working a great deal on. You're passionate about it, but there's going to be moments where it's are you going to reach points in the road where you're I'm doing this one aspect of the storytelling and X amount of people may not see it because it's part of the not part of the core story, and it just it's a lot of time to put into it. Do you ever come up against that, and how do you get around that, and
you come up to that a lot actually, and that's just a matter of finding out what your audience likes and appreciates, and that's why the kind of time we live in this digital age is so important, because we get to constantly be a part of and interact with the communities we establish. So your first go, it's a shot in the dark, but that's how you do things with content. When you have a fan base and people are hey, I really like this, and you see that they don't click on the video as much, you're okay, maybe the storytelling aspect needs to be looked at, and how can we adapt it to be more intriguing, or do we look at something else? And it's not easy, but that's just, as I said, because nobody really, really, really focuses on that experience as much. They just kind of tack it on. So for us, we see what works and what doesn't work, and kind of go from there. I think for us, it's a lot of effort in the beginning, but once you start to realize, like, hey, this aspect of the story requires a picture. It's a major point in the story. This is going to get people's immersion up by a massive percentile just because they're like, oh, now I have an image to really get me going and keep reading through. Or sometimes maybe like the GIF will turn people off, so we won't do that next time. But we'll have maybe the radio play because people want to hear the character's sass.
Right. So it's basically just trial and error until you find out what people actually like and are engaging with.
It is trial and error, but that's matching with your audience, and it's kind of seeing what resources you have. So, like, the reason why Transmedia is probably the best opportunity for the big guys is not just that they have funding, but they have a lot of extra content to throw back into it, right? So for indie people, yeah, it's going to be a lot more difficult, and you're going to have to see what you can do. But if you're, let's say, an artist and writer, yeah, you might not be able to push a lot of audio elements or video elements in, but what you can do is be like, hey, we can have a hyperlink here, and it'll go to like a blog that will talk about a character side story in a different format, and that'll just expand that universe and kind of give people more attachment to a character or a place, and that's why that's important, I think.
Right. Cool.
And then with that has to come, like, because you laid it out pretty much that, like, you will see the numbers of who's clicking on what sort of thing. So that's got to give you a better idea of, like, who your fan base is, or at least what your fan base is looking at. And then we're now in a time where, like, people are getting a lot of guff for, like, either not listening to their fan base or listening to their fan base too much. Do you have, like, ideas of where to strike the balance and maybe how that may tie into Transmedia?
Yep, there's one rule. I think Neil Gaiman is the one that said this. It's somebody can tell you something's wrong, but they can't tell you how to change it. Mm-hmm. So if something doesn't fit for the audience, that's good to know, but you don't just change to what the audience wants. You have to do what's best for your story. People won't always agree, right? But at the end of the day, it's super important to understand that people might not feel positively towards something for a reason. Just don't allow that to completely change how you go about the story, because it is your story. It's really important.
Yeah, and sometimes people don't know that they want to be sad about something until, like, afterwards. It's like, and I think with, like, the whole fact that we're, like, we can react to stuff at such, like, a gut level, like, and immediately, like, if someone in our favorite character dies in a TV show, we immediately can go to the internet and be like, no, this isn't fair, instead of actually taking the days to, like, I've had moments where I've, like, watched something and been like, okay, I need to, like, unplug for a day and just digest what I just watched, and went like, you know what, that was some really good writing, like, that was some great writing or something like that. And I think that's an issue right now. It's like everyone's like, I'm gut reaction right now, instead of letting, like, really just big moments sink in.
Letting things sink in,
And you'll see that pattern. Like, anytime a character dies in a major show or something else, people freak out, and then...
God, Walking Dead every time.
Yeah, give it like a week or a month, and then a majority of people will switch. And it's just because they had to react. And unfortunately, social media allows us to scream as soon as we feel like it.
Oh, baby.
I'm feeling really sad over here now because you brought up this topic, and now I'm just thinking of all the characters I love that have died.
You know what's great? I love how on the internet, George R. R. Martin is like, everyone is so mad at him for how many characters he kills. And then I was thinking about it.
That's why people loved Game of Thrones at first.
Oh, yeah.
Was because so many
no
people
one
were
was saying.
dying. But that's because everybody's favorite characters were still alive.
Yeah, but then but you're like, it's like it's war sort of thing. And another thing I noticed is, like, just read Bleak House, or no, go rent the BBC, or like get your hand on the BBC Bleak House. Everyone dies.
I mean,
like,
it's called Bleak House.
Yeah,
it's probably not going to be too
no,
cheap.
but it's like people are attributing this whole, like, killing main characters to him right now, whereas, like,
It's been around.
It's been
Dickens, Shakespeare,
he's just popularized.
Wait, Romeo and Juliet die?
No, they just went to sleep again. It was just another fake death. That dagger was like an dagger. It was like a
little
injection.
prop
Yeah,
dagger?
yeah, it was an injection.
Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet? I thought Baz Luhrmann created Romeo and
Yes,
Juliet.
Baz Luhrmann. that and The Great Gatsby.
Yeah.
Everything he
Yeah.
touches. And,
Yeah.
and
That's Baz Luhrmann's original character.
yeah,
right?
and then when he did Moulin Rouge, he went back in time and made sure it was a club in Paris. He was like, "This is me."
He also owns Leonardo DiCaprio, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he is essentially like the puppeteer. Like Leonardo DiCaprio is a
He's
marionette.
just an empty husk.
You don't care that you haven't won any Oscars. Smile, boy.
That's awesome.
So before we go, let's continue on this negative route.
Yeah,
I want to talk about bad examples of transmedia before we leave. If anybody can think of any. The only one that comes to mind for me was, and I don't have any experience with it, I just remember hearing about it, was the experience with Assassin's Creed Unity.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Zach, do you actually know about that?
I just have heard. I have heard nothing but Fallout. Sorry, I leaned very.
no, we
far
already
away from
spoke about Fallout. We already talked about Fallout.
Blair.
Like, Mike, you play Assassin's Creed, right?
Yeah, I avoided Unity though. Because
Yeah,
I heard
Because of all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wish I had done some research on that or something, because it's like you actually had to sign up for an account. Did you have to pay for the account? Was that part of the...
No, it was everyone gets mad. I guess the best example of poor transmedia is when it's forced on you.
Right, because you
So,
couldn't actually
you
progress
couldn't-
in
you
the
couldn't-
story
yeah, you-
without doing the transmedia.
Unity was all about playing together. It was like something they didn't want you to solo the game at all.
Right.
I hate that.
And exactly. I
that.
mean, that's cool if that's your focus, but
Yeah, you shouldn't force anything
But
on
don't
a
force it
consumer,
upon
yeah.
us. So like you had to like make an account, and then I think there were bots that you could play with that were just horrible.
Oh, okay.
And that's the issue. People tack things on without considering the seamless integration, right?
Yeah.
So you have to allow things to be a standalone and then consider the transmedia aspect.
What you can do after.
Something to
Yeah.
add to it. And it has to be seamless immersion into that alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. Like you say seamless, and you get things like New Line did this whole series like with movies where it's like toss your DVD into your CD-ROM and get more stuff, and I'm like, I'm not gonna do that.
You would get prompts coming up during the film, too,
Yeah.
wouldn't you? Well, you
Yeah.
could turn those
Well,
off.
you can
but
turn those
yeah.
off. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess, yeah, bad forms
I mean-
of transmedia is when it's just forced upon you.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's,
when you're literally denied content because you didn't participate.
because you didn't do it, yeah.
And not denied content. Like transmedia, I think like a golden rule on No Mike, it should be something that you want, and so like you would go after it. It's not like you find out what happens to this character after they fall off a cliff or something like
Right.
that by like reading this.
And there is an example of that worked for me at least, but it wasn't integral to the main storyline. So I was playing infamous Second Son a year and a half after it came out, because I got my PS4 way late, but I got it, and there was this side story to do with a character that was part of the main story, but it was like Mike was saying earlier, it developed her character more by playing this side story. But the only way to unlock new missions in the game was to go online and take part in, basically it was this mystery you were solving by like cruising through different web addresses and
alternate
input.
reality games are cool.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was. And like I was sitting here, I felt like a fucking spy writing down ciphers in my little notebook and like trying to figure them out on these websites, and it was a lot of fun. But it was also forced on you to unlock parts of the game.
Yeah,
I guess it was also sort of blocked off as its own little thing.
Yeah, I think that's just an alternate reality game because it was just giving you another game to play that wasn't a video game, right?
Right.
It wasn't really. I mean,
But that's still an example of
denying
transmedia.
game content is kind of shitty.
Yeah, but it was denying it. It wasn't denying it. It was an interactive way of unlocking it, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna end this.
Yeah.
Yep.
We didn't make you listen to us. You chose to listen to us. Okay, bye.